Chapter 5. Cady. One day when my hospital was so full of birds I did not know which way to turn, a little girl came in with a nice fat baby robin. I said I cannot take another patient, for my hospital is full to overflowing. She begged so hard, and said, I have taken it away from a cat 3 times. The father and mother bird have gone and left it, and I cannot make it eat. I could not resist such pleading, and said, I will feed it for a few days, then let it go. But my few days lasted for 1.5 years. Just at that time I was having a very pleasant correspondence with Mrs. Stanton, so I said, I am going to name the bird Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and call it Cady for short, so if it turns out to be a boy, as she always wanted to be, the name will be all right. I had no trouble in making Cady eat, and of all the birds I ever had, he was the most interesting. He seemed to understand anything I said to him, and would talk to me by the hour. We had no difficulty in understanding each other's languages, but I expected every day to hear him say real words. For many weeks he lived on crackers and milk, then mockingbird food, with only 2 mealworms a week, for they are very rich. He loved them dearly, and it was very hard sometimes not to give in to him when he asked for more. He knew where they were kept, and often turned over the bottle and tried his best to get them out. He always played with the worm a long time before eating it. Then all at once he would give his head a good toss, and down the worm would go. One day he treated a large rubber band in the same way he did his worm, and before I realised there might be danger it had disappeared. I was dreadfully frightened, and watched him carefully all day, but he seemed none the worse for his change in diet. I had him for 1.5 years, and his food always consisted of the mockingbird food, mealworm, and cracker and milk for his supper at 5 o'clock. He was so fond of the latter I could not take it away from him entirely, and when 5 o'clock came, he always knew and made me understand it was time for his supper, and would not touch his other food no matter how much he had in his dish. He grew to be very large and strong, and the handsomest robin I have ever seen. He was very playful, and had many playthings, and played with them like a dog. Corks were his special delight, and he had many sizes. A piece of embroidery he could put his bill through would amuse him many hours. He knew his name in a very short time, and, when a baby, if he heard my voice, or even saw me out in the yard, he would call just as birds do for their mother. He was full of mischief and very foxy. He was never caged, and lived on the floor and his perches. I would often see him on the top perch, looking very intently over into one corner. Then I knew he was like the little girl. When I be's still, I be's thinking mischief. In an instant he would turn and make a dive for one of the canaries. I had 3 canaries at that time, and one day I went into my room to find feathers all over the floor and many spots of blood, and Cady on the highest perch looking as innocent as a baby. After looking about, I found the dear little things in a most dilapidated condition. I was afraid Judy would die, for her wing was put out of joint, but she finally recovered. Every morning when I took my bath, Cady would come into my dressing room and have a visit, perched on the washstand or towel rack, and tell me many stories. He was a great lover of water, but he would not take his bath alone, and I always had to play with him. He would wait for me until noon, or in fact all day. I gave him a large square willow-ware vegetable dish for his tub, which my friends thought much too good for him, but nothing was too good for Cady. He always insisted upon having fresh water for his bath, and never would take it in water that had stood in the pitcher overnight. Many times I tried to fool him, but he was too smart for me. When he was ready for his bath, he would go into my dressing room and chirp, then come back to me, go back again, and keep it up until I got the water. Then the fun commenced. I began by taking water into my hand and throwing it at him. He would hop all over the room, come back to me for more, dance around first on one foot, then on the other, turn his back to me, then face me. After we had played enough in that way, he would hop into the water, and I would take a whole handful of water and throw it over him, and then he would begin work in good earnest, and such splashing you never saw. He certainly was a sight when he had finished and hopped about the room with streams of water running off him. It took him so long just to make his toilet, for every feather had to be preened just so. At that time I had a dear little boy sparrow named Mac, who was a beauty and very bright. When Cady took his bath, he always came down and took a shower bath. In the fall I began Cady's music lessons, and everyone laughed at the idea of my thinking I could teach him to sing with me. Every day after luncheon I spent an hour with him. I would put him on the back of the chair by the piano and play and sing a very catchy little waltz song, and I kept it up for weeks before he would sing at all, but I knew by his looks and actions that he was taking it all in, so I was determined I would not give up. Finally one day he began to follow me with the sweet notes of a canary, and I hardly dared breathe, but I went right on singing as if I did not hear him, and from that day on he improved with every lesson. Next I took the waltz song First Love from Olivet, and he showed great delight with the change, and entered right into the spirit of the song. We sung that for many weeks, always beginning our lessons with the first waltz song. Then for a change I thought I would try him with a waltz song, May Blossoms, which was entirely different in style and tone. He liked that best of all, and it was simply marvellous the way he sang it. He was always in such a hurry to sing it, he would often begin before the music. I began with the idea of giving him a prize when we had finished our lessons, but that did not suit him at all, and he gave me to understand that he must have one to begin on. He soon learned to take his position on the chair when I brought him into the parlour. I would begin to play, and sometimes, before he thought, he would sing a few notes. Then he would remember his treat, and would hop down into a chair, then over to another chair, which stood in the back parlour, as he was afraid of a fur rug that lay between the doors, and would never put his claws on it. He would perch on the arm of the chair until I went to my tea-table and got a crumb of biscuit or cake and gave it to him. Then he would hop back the way he came, take his position, and begin to sing. After his lessons he always had a taste of honey and a drink of water out of a whisky glass. He seemed very proud of his accomplishments, and was always more than willing to show off for visitors, take a bath as well as sing for them. One day he was in the back parlour and wanted to go into the front parlour. A gentleman was sitting with his legs crossed in the chair that was his stepping-stone, and what to do he did not know. Several times he hopped onto the first arm, then onto the floor, would look again at the fur rug, but could not get up enough courage to go over it. Again, as he hopped onto the arm, his eye caught the toe of the gentleman's shoe. In an instant he was on it and over into the front parlour, singing with great glee over his cunning feat. One day in the spring, when I was giving him his lesson, a friend came in with a very large dog. Cady had never seen a dog before, and I was afraid he would die of fright and that his voice would be ruined forever. I could not get him to sing a note for many weeks. He showed the same fear every time I brought him down to the parlours. After he had finished molting in the fall, he was more beautiful than ever. Every feather was perfect and shone like satin. I brought him downstairs to show a friend, and the first thing he did was to take his position on the chair by the piano and begin to chirp, and I knew he was asking me to play for him. For 6 months he had not sung a note, so you may imagine my delight when out poured the sweetest trills of the very best-bred canary. Like all robins, Cady was a very early riser, and during the summer he would wake me at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would have no peace until I opened my blinds. Of course it was very nice for Cady, but oh, poor me! Never before or since have I ever gotten up so early, for sleep was out of the question. He would come down on my bed, perch on my shoulder, and send the sweetest trills right down into my ear, but I could not fully appreciate them at that early hour. If that did not take effect, he would peck my hands. If I put them under the cover, then my eyes, cheek, nose, and mouth. I very much regret that Cady's photograph was not taken when he was taking a sunbath. He would toss his head back, spread out his wings, lean against anything that was most convenient, and a lady with a train posing for her portrait could not have been more graceful. Everyone said, "When winter comes, Cady will feel the cold," but Cady had no intention of being cold, and a warm room was all the Florida he cared for. Instead of a sun bath, he took a fire bath, and often before he went to sleep for the night he would perch on the back of a low chair by the fire and drink in all the warm air he could hold. The first autumn I had Cady, I was told I must clip his wings, for he was never caged. A friend came one day, and we clipped several of the bird's wings, but my heart was broken when it was done, for they all felt so ashamed, especially Cady. At that time I had the Princess of Wales, and she was a most inquisitive little lady. She would follow Cady about, look him all over, get him into a corner, examine his wings, and lift up with her bill the one that had been clipped. The next autumn, when Cady's new feathers came in, they were so beautiful I did not have the heart to clip his wings again. But he was getting so unruly, chasing my other small birds, flying through the air and picking them up as if they were flies, that I did not know what to do with him. I knew I must clip his wing or cage him, and I knew the latter would simply kill the poor bird. Each day I would get ready to cut it, my courage would fail, and I would put it off until the next. And, like all things we keep putting off, there came a day when I would have given all I possessed if I had clipped his wings in the beginning. Cady was afraid out of doors. One day he fell out of my bedroom window, and waited for me to come and get him. He often stood in my bedroom window, but never seemed to care to go out. If I took him into the yard, he would fly back into the house if the door was open. One day I took him quite a walk to see a friend. He perched on my wrist as my finger was too small, and did not offer to get off, and seemed very much at home in the friend's house, so I never thought of his going away. When he began his lessons in the autumn, his wing was all feathered out, and he could fly everywhere. Instead of hopping from chair to chair for his treat, he would fly out into the dining room, light on the dining room table, and wait for me to come. One Sunday morning I had been giving him a longer lesson than normal, for he was singing better than I had ever heard him. All at once he stopped short, flew as usual into the dining room, where the door was opened onto the piazza, and out of it he went, soaring way up into the air. It was a glorious day, and when he lighted up in a tall tree in the street, I could hear him singing with delight. If I could have had the street to myself, I am sure I could have gotten him. But it was just the hour when the children were returning from Sunday school, and I could not keep them away. Twice he came within a few feet of me, then the boys or the rustle of leaves frightened him away. For weeks he was about, and I spent many hours trying to get him to come to me. He always answered my call, but seemed afraid to fly down to me. I would not have taken hundreds of dollars for him, and whatever became of him I do not know, but I fear he perished when winter came, as he knew nothing about migrating.